listening to The Motherhood Experience, a podcast where you are part of the conversation with moms, for moms, and by moms. Let's jump into this episode with me, your host, Val Kleppen. Hello, and welcome to the Motherhood Experience podcast. Before we get into today's guest, I just want to give you a heads up. This was not an emotional conversation, but it is an emotional topic. Especially if you have experienced pregnancy or infant loss, this one is going to be an episode you'll want to keep the tissue box nearby for. My guest, Casey, was put through the ringer in her entrance into motherhood, and she shares very candidly about that during this episode. So I just wanted to give you a little heads up as I visit with my friend for the last 10 years, Casey Haberman. Casey, thank you so much for joining me on the Motherhood Experience podcast. We were just reminiscing about how long we go back.
And over 10 years.
Over 10 years, just by a little bit. But yeah, and we have a very unique story in how we met and then continued to meet, and our relationship continued. And I actually met you in the hospital room of your sister-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
Your sister delivered twins, and one had anencephaly, baby Carly.
Yeah.
And the whole family was gathered in that room. And that was the first time that I met you and your husband, Billy.
I remember that.
And your family was so great. And when they were there were at least 3 Caseys in the room.
Yes, there were 3 Caseys. So both of my brother-in-laws are named Casey. So it's myself as Casey. I'm the only girl. And then both of my sisters are married to Caseys, men Caseys. And so my mother-in-law has to remember one name.
Right. That I was going to say that makes it easy. If you're in a room, you just shout Casey and someone will answer. Someone will be there to help you. Before we get too much into this, though, I start every episode with ages and stages of kids and where you are in parenthood. Mm-hmm. So your introduction will be a little unique.
Yes.
In that regard, if you would like to tell us ages and stages for you.
Yes. So, well, our son Will, he is in heaven, and he would be 7 years old. And our daughter Emerson, she's 5, and she will turn 6 in November, and she just started kindergarten. So we are in the midst of school and starting all that school has to offer and learning the ropes about being parents of a school-age kiddo, which is fun. And overwhelming.
It's a sweet stage, but overwhelming, I think, is a good word for it. That's a good word for it. So you and I met in that hospital room just over 10 years ago now. And that was a blur for you when we reconnected then just over 2 years. It was almost 2.5 years. It was 2.5 years after that, right?
Yes.
So tell me about being pregnant with William.
Oh, I was so sick, but it was so great. I, it took us a long time to get pregnant. So I was just so happy to be so sick because I thought that meant everything was going well. And so I ended up being so sick for, most of the pregnancy. I think up until about 35 weeks, I was still having morning sickness. But I relished it because I thought, this is great. It means everything's going well. And I just remember I couldn't eat meat, and I would make my poor husband eat his meat outside or in the garage because it was winter time. And so it was just, he still reminds me of that because I couldn't stomach the smell of the meat. But it was even through the sickness, I loved being pregnant. And I remember, this is an interesting thing, because I remember telling my dad, I think I'm going to miss feeling, I didn't know Will was a boy. I just said, I think I'm going to miss feeling baby move on the inside. And my dad said, but it's so great because they'll be here on the outside. And little did we know that that wouldn't be the case for us. But I just remember just cherishing those moments that I would feel him, and I was so excited to be pregnant because it took so long to get pregnant.
Yeah.
So I just remember relishing in the movements, and I remember thinking, I'm gonna miss this. And I almost wonder if that wasn't some premonition or some weird foresight that I had.
Yeah.
Did you ever have anything like that?
Yeah, I just in that episode that I was telling you about that I recorded just talking about the last 10 years, when I got pregnant with Harlan, it was not long after. I just felt like something was different and I
Mhm.
didn't know what that was. I didn't even necessarily know it was a bad thing. I just knew
Yes.
that it wasn't great and that this pregnancy and the relationship that I would have with Harlan would be something that would shape me
Hmm.
kind of forever. But
Yes.
I couldn't have put it into words then that what I sensed.
Right.
Yeah, so I totally get what you're saying. And also you were a nurse in
Yeah.
oncology at the time.
Hmm. Yep.
So you were working all kinds of shifts.
Yes, I worked, like primarily worked day shift, but I worked, I mean, I was still working. I think I only had one day off a week, and on my feet and trying to get through the shifts without vomiting.
Right.
So
Right. And then one day things felt different.
different. Yes, I remember this so vividly. My husband and I went to Costco the night before, and we stocked up on stuff because I was almost 38 weeks.
Mhm.
We got ice cream and we went home, and I remember just feeling different. Like I didn't feel and move as much.
Mhm.
I wasn't in any pain. And then I went to bed. I thought, okay, I'm just gonna go to bed. I didn't want to be a bother and go in, and maybe it's the nurse in me, but I just thought it'll be okay. And I woke up the next morning early, and I just thought, something's just doesn't seem right to me. So I called triage at Sanford and I said, I'm coming in just to get checked. I have to go to work at 7:30. And so they said, okay, come in. So I remember walking in, I was in my scrubs, I was ready to go to work to this wasn't when it was downtown. So I went up to the labor and delivery floor at Sanford and hooked me up to the monitors. Ugh, heartbeat right away. I thought, okay, I'm just overreacting. And he started moving right away. I could see my belly moving. I said, oh, okay, we're good. I said, this is silly. I'm gonna go. And she said, well, it's our policy to keep you here for 30 minutes. And I said, okay, well, could we hurry it up? Because I'm going to be late for work. And then I just was sitting there for a while, and it was shift change, I think, around shift or going to be shift change at the hospital. And all of a sudden there was all this hustle and bustle around me. And I thought, okay, well, I mean, I'm a nurse, but I just thought the charge nurse was coming in to be nice to this other nurse and let her off for shift change. And I noticed baby's heartbeat going off the monitor, but I felt fine. And I noticed my heart rate going way up. And all of a sudden they're like, we're going to get a stat ultrasound. And the doctor came in, and I just remember seeing on the ultrasound, baby's heart rate was only about 20 beats a minute, which then all of a sudden they were flying me down the hallway, emergency C-section. They let me call Billy on the way as I was being wheeled down to the OR. And then I remember being put under, and I remember just thinking, just get my baby out.
Mhm.
And the next thing I know, I was waking up in recovery, and I was all alone. And Billy was all the way down in Gwinner, and he had to drive all the way back. So it was an hour, and he was almost to Gwinner. He had to drop the carpool people off and come back. So it was almost an hour and a half away. So by the time I got out into the recovery room, he was not there yet. And it was just the doctor that was there with me, the doctor and the nurse. And they had told me that when I was groggy, I asked about Will, and they said, no, he didn't make it. And I couldn't grasp what that meant because I was
Mhm.
sedated and I was alone, and it was one of the worst moments in my whole life. And I was just remember not being able to grasp magnitude of this until until my husband got there. And then it was like your world comes crashing down on you, and
Yeah.
you can't even fathom that this is real life.
And so was it at that point or while you were still coming out of anesthesia that they told you what had happened?
I was coming out of anesthesia and they told me that I remember the doctor told me that my uterus had ruptured, must have been on the table while I was, or in triage while I was being checked, is what they figured based on the blood work that they had done off like the umbilical cord. Then the NICU team came in and told me that they had tried to do everything they could, and they had tried for a good 15 minutes. And so I recall that during anesthesia wearing off.
Yeah.
And then I remember asking once I came to a little more for the NICU doctor to come back in and the OB doctor to come back in, because they had told me when I was still groggy and I didn't understand the full magnitude until all the anesthesia wore off. I couldn't grasp that full magnitude of what they were actually telling me. So
Yeah.
they did come back in, I think later that day, and re-explain everything to me
Yeah.
and my husband.
Yeah. So completely unexpected turn of events. You go in just to get checked. You have reassurance, peace of mind. The next thing, you're being emergency rushed to the OR, and baby Will didn't make it. Your sister-in-law, Kelly, whose room we met in those 2 years prior, called Michelle, who called me, and we brought the cuddle cot
Yes.
to your hospital room, but still, like, this had just happened. You didn't remember who I was. This thing was fresh out of the box. We were trying to get it set up just so that you could have as much time as possible with baby Will. And I do remember telling Billy at some point, like, as soon as this is up and running, I'm going to get out of here. I promise you. But neither one of you you're just like, your world had just been shattered. And I knew so much. I could just tell by looking in your faces. Like, it just took me right back to my own hospital room 3 years prior. And so you and I were talking off camera, and I said, I don't really remember how I kept forcing my way into your life. I think I don't remember if I showed up with a meal or I don't.
I think the first time you came, I think you brought us a book or something, I want to say, or
Okay.
something. You brought something over, and I can't quite remember what it was, but then you did bring a meal. So it was delicious, by the way.
Good. Good. Just trying to force my way into your life here and there. But you guys were so gracious, and I just felt for you so much in that hospital room, and I wanted to do more. I wanted to do more than the cuddle cot. But then to hear your story and know you had gone in just for some peace of mind.
Yes.
And the next thing you know, you weren't even due for another couple of weeks. And the next thing you know, you're having to say goodbye to your son.
Yes. It was the most traumatic thing that's ever happened in my life. And I still hold that trauma. I mean, I just told you tonight before when we were chatting about sometimes I don't feel like I have a memory. And I think half of that is from the trauma. I just think it's just so life-changing what happened. And of course we miss Will every single day.
Yeah.
That does not change no matter if 2 years have passed or 7 years have passed. It's still this
Yeah.
deep miss. Ache.
And then there's the age-old question that it seems like everyone tries to pounce on, after you experience a loss. It's almost like they hope that at least this was my experience. They hope that if you get pregnant again and have another baby, then you will be fixed.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and so I know that people were asking you,
Yes.
are you going to try again?
Yes. And we had no idea if we could try again because of the nature of the birth. My uterus literally split in two in the thickest part of the uterus. And that happens the doctor gave me a statistic, and I just hate statistics to this
Mm.
day, but it's in a woman that has had a C-section. I have never had a C-section prior to this. It happens in 0.01% of those people. And so it happens in like point even that in women who have an intact uterus. And that makes me so angry because I could never find a cause of why this happened. And we did all the tests when we were trying to figure out if we could get pregnant again. I went down to Mayo and I did everything because I just wanted to know if I could have another baby. And as much as I knew that wouldn't fix this,
Right.
Fix our losing Will, it's almost like that's what my mind focused on after our loss. I needed to find some hope or some light in this. And so I went full force into trying to figure out if I could have another baby. And we went down to Mayo, and I remember the doctor looking at me and saying, you can have another baby. However, we will put you on bed rest at 20 weeks and we'll deliver your next baby at 30. I don't think I think it was like 32 weeks, just based on the nature of the rupture. And he said, there's no guarantee that you won't re-rupture. And you do realize that this is life-threatening for both you and baby.
Mm.
And after that, my husband I just remember that long drive home from Rochester, and he said, I don't know if I can go through this again.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can go through this. And I, of course, said, I'll do anything. I don't,
Right.
you don't care. I just I didn't care at that point. I just knew that I wanted so bad a baby to hold. I mean, I think I really at that point wanted Will to be here so bad.
Right.
That I was trying to compensate. So I had so many great friends at that point, and they're still my great friends to this day. But I was having coffee with one of my friends, and she said, something's been on my heart a lot. Yes, my friend said, there's something that I've been thinking about. It's been on my heart lately. And that I just feel really called to do this. And I said, okay. And she said, I would love to carry a baby for you. And I said, and I was at the point in my life where I was still very hopeful that I could carry a child. And we are still within our, I just got back from Mayo. I wasn't convinced that I wanted to let that go yet. And I was so overwhelmed with this selflessness that my friend had.
Mm.
And how incredible to even begin to offer up yourself for me. I was just in awe, and I said, oh, and I don't even know actually what I said. I think I was just so in shock that somebody would be so gracious. And both my sister Kelly and my sister-in-law Kelly and my sister both said, if it comes down to it, we would absolutely do it too for you. They both had said that. I know my sister was pregnant with my nephew at the time. He's the same age. They were both pregnant. Kelly was pregnant with her twins, her second set of twins.
Mm-hmm.
And my sister was pregnant. They were both pregnant when we lost Will. And that was just a knife in the heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All on its own. I was so happy for them. But I just remember Kelly delivered her twins in May, and after Will was born in February. And I remember that was the first time I went back up to the floor at Sanford where Will was born. And I just remember thinking, I can do this because this is my niece and nephew, and I can do this because this is for Kelly. And I purposely remember holding Carson, who's their boy, and I purposely remember saying, I'm going to hold the boy because I want to show them that I can do this.
Yeah.
And it was fine. And it was great because I was so happy for them. My sister delivered in August. So Will has 3 cousins, just his age. And both Kelly and Katie both said that they would carry for us. However, they both just had children of their own. So
Right.
when my friend offered, she said, and I'm ready to do this now. And I said, oh, okay. So I remember going home and talking to my husband about it. And we're such conventional people that this was such an unconventional way to have a family.
Sure.
And I remember not being sure what to feel or if this was right or wrong or would we be judged for this? I don't know.
Mm,
And I finally got to a point where I thought people have families in unconventional ways all the time. Why can't we? And I knew that Billy was at a point where he was just did not want me to carry a baby. And I finally had to come to terms with it too. I think 7 years later, sometimes I think to myself, maybe we could try again. Maybe my uterus is rested enough and got enough collagen in it. I don't know. Could we use it again? But to circle back to the surrogacy, I just finally felt peace with it.
mm,
And I believe in signs from heaven. And I felt that we were getting so many signs from Brother Will that this was the way that it's supposed to be. And so we went ahead with our surrogacy journey with our dear friend, whose name is also Katie. So my sister is Katie and our friend is Katie too. And not to say it wasn't emotionally hard, but she was the most amazing person and the most selfless person that she made it 10 times easier. And it was emotional in the fact that I already had no control in my life, and now I have even less control.
right.
But I remember sitting in Sanford Reproductive Medicine Clinic, and I remember it was the day we were going to find out if the pregnancy test was positive or negative. And I remember Katie and I were sitting there, and I looked outside, and there was a rainbow in the sky of, I swear, what was a perfectly blue sky with just a couple little clouds in it. And there's a rainbow. And Katie said, "Look, there's a rainbow." And I said, "It's a sign. This has got to be a good sign. I feel good about this." And sure enough, we got the pregnancy test back and it was positive. And she carried Emerson until she was born, November 25th.
What was that like? Like, I know what pregnancy after loss is like,
Mm-hmm.
but what was it like having someone else carrying your baby after you lost a baby?
There was 2 sides of it. Part of me felt very out of control. And part of me felt so much peace because I knew that my body was broken.
Yeah.
And she had such uneventful pregnancies, and I felt good about it. I don't know how to describe it. There was a part of it that was, yes, it was very emotional, but I thought if anybody can do this for me, it's Katie.
It's Katie.
Yes.
And do you think that you and Billy ever would have come to that option or determination without her just outright offering it to you?
I think maybe we would have possibly pursued it with maybe one of our siblings down the road if they were still willing to do that. Because I know they had both offered, but they were both pregnant.
Right.
So it was just like this perfect timing. And Katie, our surrogate, always says, I always felt like God was just telling me to do this. She talked a lot about that, and I felt it was just this perfect timing and all these signs from Brother Will. And I don't know if we would have gotten there eventually
Yeah.
without her.
And Katie was, I don't, what do they call a surrogate host? But Emerson is totally Casey and
Totally.
Billy's baby.
Yes. Yes. So she's technically called a gestational carrier when it's like genetically Emerson is mine and Billy's. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's this whole world of reproductive medicine too that is
Right.
interesting in itself.
You and I have never talked about this. It's all coming to mind right now. So it's like machine gun fire. Hang tight.
Ready for
But
it.
you had baby Will. The next pregnancy is a surrogacy and you're having a daughter.
Mhm.
Was there a wrestle in that?
With
Like emotionally, did you feel like and lost parents, it's either or, they can go either way with it. But did you grieve at all not having a boy while still celebrating having a girl?
yes, yes.
Okay.
I remember, I don't know if I've ever told anybody this, but I remember we did a gender reveal, but I had peaked beforehand because I couldn't handle a surprise. Like I don't even know if Billy knows that, but I could not handle the surprise of the gender. I just
Yeah.
needed to know.
Yeah.
And I think you get that way after loss. Like sometimes you just can't handle the surprise. So I peaked and I was so glad I did because not that I didn't want a girl, but I think I also thought so much that it would be a boy
Mm,
because we lost Will,
mm-hmm.
and I was terrified to have a girl because because I know how I was in my teens and the hormones. So I was glad that I did a little peek before the gender reveal so I could compose myself. And I was so happy to have her. That's not it at all.
Right.
It's just
Right.
it is though it's funny to kind of grieve the not having the gender of the child you lost, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you're, life out in the country.
Mhm.
And did you grow up in the country? I know Billy did, but did you also?
Billy did. I did as well. I grew up outside a small town. We lived on a lake and I loved living in the country growing up because I'm a little bit of an introvert and I just like being
Yeah.
not around a lot of people.
Right. 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 And what is country life like for Emerson?
Ever since kindergarten started, she's been talking about not living in town. So I think she hears about all the town friends that get to go to the park all the time. And so she feels like she's missing out as of late. However, she gets to run across to grandma's house. She gets to drive the golf cart around. Um, I think it's pretty great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
climbs trees. I think she has a blast out here.
Yeah. Do you still, 7 years later, do you still feel like you quote unquote hear from Will now and then?
Yes, all the time. I think, well, it goes in phases. Our sign from Will is hearts. Like he'll send us hearts, and she will find hearts in the most random of places, and she knows that it's a sign from her brother Will.
Mm.
And just the other day, I was driving to work and I saw a heart in the sky, and I thought a heart of clouds. And I started this new job, and I just kind of need all the emotional help I can get right now. And
Right.
I just said, oh, thank you. Thanks, Will. I needed that.
Yeah.
So I think we do still get signs from him. And I love that Emerson gets them and she knows that they're from her brother. She'll talk about him all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
That's that's one thing that's interesting to me, even with my kids. Heston is younger, but he every night in his prayers he thanks God for Harlan. Even though
yes.
Haley was the one who saw her, knew that I was pregnant with her, Heston came after her, and
Uh-huh.
he still prays every night, thanking God for her.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
So amazing.
yeah.
They,
I love it. It's one of my favorite things.
absolutely.
But it is super interesting. Super
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
That they're in tune with it.
Yeah. How does parenthood look for you now, raising a girl and not having expected that initially? What is parenthood like now?
It's great.
So I think the best thing about having Emerson as our daughter is that she is
has this big personality, and sometimes she keeps us on our toes. And I think the best part about that is because her brother is in heaven and
Yeah.
she is our one here.
Yeah.
And I always say that she could be 6 kids because she has so much energy. And so she keeps us going. And I love it because it's refreshing to us and it makes me feel like I'm not missing out on having more kids here. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Emerson, I can't believe you're in kindergarten, honey. You were just itty bitty when I saw you last. And now you've got all the sass, girl. What's your favorite, maybe surprise that something you didn't expect about motherhood that you really relished today?
I think it's those small moments. I just remember a couple weeks before Emerson started kindergarten, and I rocked her to sleep, and I haven't done that for so long, but it was just so sweet. And
Yeah.
oh, I just soak those moments in when you can just snuggle and love on her.
Yeah. The older they get, they still happen, but the fewer and further between they go.
I know I documented it because I took a picture. This hasn't happened for a while. We need to document this.
Yeah. And it seems like every stage of parent, at least for me, every stage of parenting, you really look forward, or there are favorite things about every stage, but you still really, really cherish the stage that you just came from.
Yes, I know. This stage I'm really loving. I'm loving her independence that she's asserting, and she loves to choose her outfits. She chose the most beautiful dress to wear to church the other day. And I just think it's cool to see her personality coming out right
Yeah.
now and
Yeah. Yeah.
all the
Well,
things she's learning.
what was the one thing that stuck out to you where, if you had to do it all again, you would look back and say, this one thing is what really gave me hope through that? Or was it maybe multiple things?
I think it was the signs from
Yeah.
heaven.
Yeah.
I think that above anything. I remember vividly taking walks. We lived in West Fargo at the time, and we lived way out. I mean, not way out, but we lived what was then the edge of town.
Right.
You would walk, and it was mainly construction sites, but I would look past those and I just stare at the sunsets. I would walk when the sun was setting, and I remember just wanting to jump into the sunsets, but they also brought so much comfort to me that I think that is one of the things I look back on when it was like the lowest of the low and
Yeah.
just feeling like I could jump into the sunset, and then at the same time it bringing me comfort in an odd way. That's what kept me going, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Now I want to jump into a sunset.
I know. Wouldn't it be wonderful? Oh,
Oh, well, Casey, I so appreciate you coming on here and sharing your just
so good to see you.
so good to see you.
If I could just jump through the phone and hug you and get a Val hug, I totally would.
Oh, girl. Well, hey, you guys can take a field trip to our part of life in the country anytime.
Yes, same,
Anytime.
same. You
I
said
remember
that.
you.
We don't even know where you live.
Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you where I live. But also, I remember, Casey, that you said you wanted, at one point in time, you wanted to come to, I can't remember, you had a cute name for it, but it was like the Val's School of Prairie Skills or something like that.
Yes,
You had a cute name for it.
I remember saying that. I still need that school, by the way. I would love to milk my own cow, and I want to have a bigger garden. You would be just ashamed with the size of my garden and the looks of it right now. And I need to
Oh,
know how to can stuff. So
yep, yep. We'll
He
do,
has a lot of weeds.
yeah, a lot. It's a year for weeds, I think, Emerson, because we do too. Those weeds were the only thing that survived our hailstorm this year. So
Yes,
there's
so
that.
whenever you start that school, I will be your first student.
All right. I'll hold you to that, dear.
Okay.
Oh, well, thank you again for coming on here
Yes.
and sharing your story with everybody. I so appreciate it.
So good to see you.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. To join our exclusive TME community, head over to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. Be sure to follow The Motherhood Experience on Facebook or Instagram, and please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment below, and we'll catch you next time.